but though I have gone there frequently in the morning, I have met but three ladies on foot, and of these two were foreigners. After all, every one has feet, but ladies alone have carriages, and it may be a mixture of aristocracy and indolence which prevents the Mexican Doñas from profaning the soles of their feet by a contact with their mother earth. The paseo called de Bucareli, after a viceroy of that name, is a long and broad avenue bounded by the trees which he planted, and where there is a large stone fountain whose sparkling waters look cool and pleasant, ornamented by a gilded statue of Victory. Here every evening, but more especially on Sunday and fête days, which last are nearly innumerable, may be seen two long rows of carriages, filled with ladies, crowds of gentlemen on horseback riding down the middle between these carriages, soldiers at intervals attending to the preservation of public order, and multitudes of common people and léperos, mingled with some well-dressed gentlemen on foot. The carriages are for the most part extremely handsome European coaches, with fine horses and odd liveries, mingled with carriages made in the country, some in the old Mexican fashion, heavy and covered with gilding, or a modern imitation of an English carriage, strong but somewhat clumsy and ill finished. Various hackney coaches drawn by mules are seen among the finer equipages, some very tolerable, and others of extraordinary form and dimensions, which bear tokens of having belonged in former days to some noble don. Horses, as being more showy, are more fashionable in these public promenades than mules, but the latter animal requires less care, and is capable of undergoing more fatigue than the horse. Most families have both mules and horses in their stable, and for those who visit much this is necessary. The carriages, of which the most fashionable seems to be the carratela, open at the sides with glass windows, are filled with ladies in full toilet, without mantillas, their heads uncovered, and generally coiffed with flowers or jewels, but the generality being close coaches, afford but an indistinct view of the inmates as they pass along saluting each other with their fingers or fan. The whole scene on the evening of a fête is exceedingly brilliant, but very monotonous. The equestrians, with their fine horses and handsome Mexican dresses, apparently take no notice of the ladies as they pass, rarely salute them, and never venture to enter into conversation with them. But they are well aware to whom each carriage belongs, and consequently, when it behooves them to make their horses curvet, and otherwise show off their horsemanship to advantage, black eyes are upon them, and they know it. When the carriages have made two or three turns, they draw up at different stations in a semicircle a little off the road, and there the inmates sit and view the passers by. Occasional streams of smoke may be seen issuing from the carriages, but chiefly, it must be confessed, from the most old-fashioned equipages and from the hackney coaches. Smoking amongst ladies in the higher classes is going very much out of fashion, and is rarely practised openly except by elderly or at least by married ladies. In a secondary class, indeed, young and old inhale the smoke of their cigaritos without hesitation, but when a custom begins to be considered vulgar, it will hardly subsist another generation. Unfeminine as it is, I do not think it looks ungraceful to see a pretty woman smoke. This paseo commands a fine view of the mountains, but I greatly prefer the Viga, which now begins to be the fashionable promenade. It is bordered by a canal shaded by trees, which leads to the Chinampas, and is constantly covered with Indians in their canoes, bringing in fruit and flowers and vegetables to the Mexican market. Early in the morning it is a pretty sight to see them in these canoes gliding along in a perfect bower of green branches and flowers. Yesterday, on returning from an evening drive there, having left C n and several gentlemen who had dined with us, taking coffee and smoking upon the balcony, I found that by good fortune I had escaped being witness of a murder which took place before our door. These gentlemen had observed after some time a group of persons, male and female, of the lower class, talking and apparently amusing themselves, sometimes laughing and at other times disputing and giving each other blows. Suddenly one of the number, a man, darted out from amongst the others, and tried to escape by clambering over the low wall which supports the arches of the aqueduct. Instantly and quite coolly another man followed him, drew his knife and stabbed him in the back. The man fell backwards with a groan, upon which a woman of the party, probably the murderer's wife, drew out her knife and stabbed the man several times to the heart. The others meanwhile neither speaking nor interfering, but looking on with folded arms, with their usual placid smile of indifference. At the same time, some soldiers appeared in the distance riding down the street, seeing which the man and woman who had committed the murder endeavoured to take shelter in our house. The porter had fortunately barred the doors, and the soldiers riding up took them both into custody. No sensation was excited by this, which is an everyday occurrence. Yesterday I saw a dead man lying near the Lonja (the Exchange), and nobody took any notice of him. "You have been engaged in a very disagreeable business," said I to Colonel , who had come to pay us a visit, and was still en grande tenue, having just returned from the execution of one of his own soldiers who had stabbed a comrade. "Yes," said he, with an air of peculiar gaiety, "we have just been shooting a little tambour." We were invited lately to a dia de campo, a day in the country, a very common amusement here, in which, without any peculiar arrangement or etiquette, a number of people go out to some country place in the environs, and spend the day in dancing, breakfasting, walking about, etc. This was given at Tacubaya by Don B g, a senator, and was amusing enough. The music consisted of a band of guitars, from which the performers, common men, and probably self-taught, contrived to draw wonderfully good music, and in the intervals of dancing, played airs from the Straniera and Puritani. The taste for music is certainly universal, the facilities wonderful, the science nearly at zero. The ladies in general wore neither diamonds nor pearls, but a sort of demi toilette, which would have been pretty if their dresses had been longer and their shoes not so tight. Some wore bonnets, which are considered full dress. The E family and the young Señora de C were beautifully dressed. Mexican women, when they sit, have an air of great dignity and the most perfect repose of feature. They are always to be seen to most advantage on their sofas, in their carriages, or in their boxes at the theatre. There were immensely long tables covered with Mexican cookery, which I begin to get accustomed to, and a great many toasts were given, and a great quantity of champagne drank. We danced a great deal, quadrillas, waltzes, and Spanish country dances, walked about in the garden and orchard in the evening, and returned to dance again to the music of the indefatigable guitars, so that it was dusk when all the carriages set off, much about the same time, to bear each other company. The following day, the Countess C having been kind enough to procure an order for permission to visit the Colegio Vizcaino, which I was anxious to see, we went there with a large party. This college, founded by the gratuitous charities of Spaniards, chiefly from the province of Biscay, is a truly splendid institution. It is an immense building of stone, in the form of a square, on the model, they say, of the Palace of Madrid, and possesses in the highest degree the air of solidity and magnificence which distinguishes the Mexican edifices, and which, together with the width and regularity of the streets, the vastness of the public squares, the total absence of all paltry ornament, the balconies with their balustrades and window gratings of solid iron and bronze, render Mexico, in spite of its insufficient police, one of the noblest looking cities in the world. The object of this college is to provide for the education of the children of Spaniards, especially for the descendants of Biscayans, in Mexico, a certain number being admitted upon application to the directors. There are female teachers in all the necessary branches, such as reading, writing, sewing, arithmetic, etc. But besides this, there is a part of the building with a separate entrance, where the children of the poor, of whatever country, are educated gratis. These spend the day there and go home in the evening. The others are kept upon the plan of a convent, and never leave the institution while they belong to it; but the building is so spacious and airy, with its great galleries and vast court and fine fountains, garden and spacious azotea, that the children are perfectly well off. There are portieres and sisters, pretty much as in a convent, together with an old respectable rectora, and the most perfect order and cleanliness prevails through the whole establishment. We first visited the poor scholars, passing through the large halls where they sat with their teachers.